this is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Spec Tales, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesús.
Heidi ho, all you spectators, and thanks for joining us for this special edition episode of Spec Tales. Jesús and I this week were extremely lucky to get an opportunity to preview the upcoming Incal book Psychoverse from Humanoids, and we are joined by the editor of said book, Jake Thomas. Jake, thank you so much for joining us.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
As we all know, I am thrilled to have you here as well, Jake, just because. And no, I'm not talking about you, Jake. I'm talking about the other Jake.
You're talking about Jake Thomas, right?
That's right. I'm not thrilled to have Spec Tales Jake here. I'm thrilled to have Jake Thomas here because one thing I love is getting things ahead of time. I've said that before. I love getting things ahead of time. I love reading it. I love just having that knowledge, and then getting to speak to somebody that was a part of the project. And this is a huge project. This is a cool, very cool thing. So I'm very excited for this special edition and to have you on, Jake. We really appreciate you coming on here with us.
Absolutely, man. You got that hot take now. You're one of the first to read this new book. So flaunt your privilege, man. You're
yeah. I know. Well, that's the thing. It's all a gimmick, right? I'm not a journalist. I'm just a regular comics guy that gets to read comics early. So the people that listen can live through me because that's all I am. I just get to read comics early.
Well, Jake Thomas, we've been on this book for a few months because we had first heard about it way back on March 2nd when we had Mark Wade on our show it was episode 33. Mark was on and he gave us a little bit of a preview about what was coming down the pipe for the Incal. And he told us about it. And of course, as soon as we, got a little bit closer to this release, we reached out because selfishly, we wanted to read the book.
No shame in that.
But of course, we really wanted to also dive deeper into the Incal. When Mark was on, we talked about it briefly, but we didn't really dive super deep into it. And this certainly gives us that opportunity. But before we really dive into this new book, this new adventure in the Incal universe, how about we talk a little bit more about you, Jake? You were with Marvel for 11 and a half years or so, somewhere in that ballpark, correct?
I was at Marvel for almost exactly 11 years on the dot. I think I came here to Humanoids about a week after my 11th Marvel anniversary.
Wow. Way to
I
celebrate.
Hit 11 and I said enough.
You were moving out, right? Like you had decided that you were running away and you ran away to Humanoids, which is one of my favorite publishers. I'm a huge fan of Humanoids and the books that they release. Most recently, well, not most recently anymore, but as of late, until I read this, my favorite thing that had been published this year was Chronophage by Tim Seeley.
It's a gorgeous book. I love it.
Yeah, I love that. The visuals on that book are astonishing. Still you can go back anytime. They never cease to amaze. So you came to Humanoids about a year and a half ago or something along those lines, and you are now the chief editor?
Executive editor, I think, is my official title.
I'm sorry that I missed the executive.
We obey by the same rules as whose line is it anyway? The names are made up and the points don't matter. Right? I'm an executive editor. What does that mean? Nobody really knows. I'm the executive editor because I'm the only editor here. It is me.
So you rule over your own kingdom.
An editor and the associate editor.
So you just change different hats, right? You're just like, okay, I'm this hat, that hat.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point is that you are the master of your editorial domain, and that's and that's good. So you had the opportunity to work on Psychoverse, which is this prequel to the original Incal story. When you came a year and a half ago to Humanoids, how far along was this project in the works?
The scripts were pretty much done. Yannick had drawn, I think, maybe 2 issues or so of it. So it was about half drawn. And so I could just jump in and sort of keep the plate spinning was my main job. But of course, Mark Russell is amazing to work with. And so I went in and chatted through some stuff with Mark, chatted through some stuff with Yannick. We had a big time finding just the right colorist, because colors are very important, particularly in the European market. They have a very stylistic kind of color approach that they like. So, we finally found Dave McCaig, who did an amazing job on the book. So I shepherded it more than I created it, but I was so thrilled to be a part of it, because the Incal is a huge book for me, and I think that all of the books that we are now adding to the Incal universe are just really incredible. Some of the best books I've worked on in my career, and I wish I could take more credit for them. Completely bury poor Rob Levin and say, yes, it was all me. No, Rob did a lot of amazing work up front, and then I got to come in and take the baton from him, over halfway to the finish line and just run him through.
And so when you were coming into this position, did you know that this opportunity lay in front of you to take this to the finish line?
Yes, it was discussed when I interviewed. I asked what projects were in the pipeline, and they'd even been kind of announced at that point, because they'd had a free comic book day that had some general hype about them.
Yeah.
So I knew, I was aware, but I had no idea what they really were. And so when I found out, I was thrilled.
Yeah, of course.
Very cool.
So I guess I have a 2-part question based on that answer as well. Is one, how, before you got to work on this, how familiar or how important was the Incal to you as an editor and as a comic book enthusiast or comic book person? So that, I guess that's the first part of the question.
Really important to me, I would say, because, we talked about this a little bit before we hit the record button, but the Incal was one of those books that really expanded my mind as far as what comics could do. I read it when I initially read it years and years ago. I liked it and I could appreciate it, but I didn't really get it. And then there was a moment where I came back to it and read it again, because it sort of was one of those books that lived in my brain, even though it hadn't clicked for me 100%. And when I read it again, it was just one of those moments of realizing, God, we could do so much with this medium and this approach. There's so many ways we can push ourselves and take things into new and exciting corners, and the way that they play with storytelling and form, and the balance of philosophy and just, bodily earthly delights was amazing to me. I mean, I'm a huge film nerd too, and it's one of those moments similarly where suddenly foreign films click for you. You get that point where you can watch and you can vibe with the subtitles, and you can get the different cultural approaches, and you realize that there's more to film than you first thought. The Incal was one of those comic books for me where suddenly a whole new universe opened up for me in comics.
So that's awesome, because I've heard a lot of that. For me, I've known about it. I've seen panels from it. I've seen, pages of it. I also know that, through this, what we do, we get to interview a lot of, creators, and it's impacted a bunch of creators, writers, artists. So the question that I have for you, being now that we know that, is the weight of this story of the Incal, of these characters. Is that something that you took with you when, like you said, you got to shepherd it to the finish line, right? Like,
Mhm.
is that something that weighed on you as you were going through? Like, man, this is something that I really loved, and it made a big impact for me, and now I'm a part of it, so I have to, treat it a specific way or a different way or something.
It's really tricky because I could feel that, but I try to ignore it because I think you can't. The Incal is actually such a testament to this. I think that there's a certain way of treating sacred text, kind of. Like, I think a lot of people view the Incal as a kind of sacred comic text, but you have to keep it alive. And I think Jodorowsky would be one of the first people to say that when he sort of opened the gates on people doing new Incal books. Part of his mission was like, I don't want to be a big part of this. I want it to live for these other people. I don't want them to do Jodorowsky's Incal. I want them to do Mark Russell and Yannick Paquette's Incal. I want them to do Dan Waters and John Davis Hunt's Incal. Like, he really wanted them to bring themselves to it. So you had to kind of be like, okay, this is big. It's important. It's a huge addition to a seminal piece of text. But really, what do we want to do with it? What do we want to say with it? Where can we have fun with it and let it really mean something to us? Because that's the only way it's going to mean anything to the reader. So it was a fun balancing act of treating it with reverence and then kind of trying to throw that reverence out the window and make the best comic book you can make.
Yeah, that's go ahead, Jake.
Oh, I was just so excited to hear that Jodorowsky, sort of pushed that onto the creators, essentially, not because he birthed the original, right, in 1981, or I don't know how long he had been working on it before it came to publishing, but him and Mœbius, when they originally published this work, it's up there from a science fiction standpoint. It is right next to Akira. I'm trying to think of anything else that is as sacred, and it's up there. I was so curious how much he was involved, because he's been working on it. He didn't just make it in 1981. He's been working all the way through 2018 was the last book that he had worked on was published.
Well, yeah, he did Metabarons afterwards, and he did Techno Priests, and the universe around the Incal is very big and has existed for decades. And really, outside of a couple of very small books, the second cycle of Metabarons and CMAC, both of which Jerry Frisson did.
Yep.
No one else had really touched the Incal other than Jodorowsky as far as writing and creating the world goes. So it was a very big deal for him to say, this is the first time he's officially sort of letting the Incal get touched by other hands. And, Jodorowsky is such a fascinating guy that when you talk to him, he's just really, he's 90 something years old.
Is he like 93 now?
Yeah, I think so. 1994. And he's just got more pep and energy. Like, it's the same thing with Stan Lee. When I would be at conventions and you'd see Stan, and Stan would like bound up the stairs to talk at the panel and stuff. And you're just like, this guy's got more gusto than I do. And he's 50 years older than me. But Jodorowsky has, and he has that philosophical side of just wanting to embrace life and embrace growth and change and all that kind of stuff. And so, very philosophically, he said, create your own Incal, and really stepped back and let these guys do their thing. So he was not very involved in the sense that he didn't really want much oversight or anything like that, but he was very involved philosophically because he gave that freedom and that blessing to just play and have fun and build and create.
Did he provide any thoughts after the fact? Has he read it? Did he weigh in?
We've sent the books to him. Okay. So he's seen the books, but again, like he really wanted it to be its own thing. So, I think he's happy with how we ran with it. He seems to be really into it, but there's been really no tactile input from his part. I think that blessing of freedom, which is the greatest thing you could give to creators, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that that's great. I thought that was really cool. It's also part of the book that you guys talk about, that of what he said that it's time to go out, that his version has already been told and he's allowing other versions to live and exist. But that's also a really interesting, I guess, thought where he's really like, not that he can't, obviously he can if he wanted to, but it's probably better for him not to say anything, because whether he says something positive or negative, it will affect the actual story of what it is. Because, it's a great book, but Jodorowsky doesn't like it, or it's a great book, but Jodorowsky could have done better. I don't know. Like, it's just one of those things where when it's a certain story, I mean, I'm just looking back at like Star Wars with, the originals and then the trilogy and then the new ones, and how fan bases that have been ingrained in this story for so long with this creator for so long can react either positively or negatively to new things. And as for me, I love new things, right? Like, I love new things. I want to see new things. I want to see different things, because we've seen that already. The Incal, like we said, has come out. It's been out here for 40 years or something already. Yeah. And it's great and it's fantastic. But it's also a cool story that can be told different ways through different people's eyes or viewpoints. So I'm really excited about this book right now.
Yeah, again, Yoda was such a philosophical beast. I think he has the sort of Zen wherewithal to let a lot of this stuff, be free and wash over him. And he also knows, again, he's got the Incal. No one's ever going to touch that. It's impossible. It reminds me of when someone was interviewing Stephen King and asked him if he was ever worried about how adaptations might affect his books or whatever. And he turned around to his bookshelf and he said, they're still there. Like the Incal is unassailable. So
yes,
he definitely has that sort of Zen approach to it, I think.
But in saying that, I do think Russell really comes, he comes in swinging with this story, this book. And I kind of forgot, we got a little overzealous here. I forgot to really tell the listeners, for all of you out there listening going, wait, what are we talking about? I know I said we were talking about Psychoverse, but just a real brief synopsis. This is a prequel to the original book from 1981, The Incal. A realm made of pure potential and possibility known as the Psychoverse has declared war on all material reality, the Matterverse, and the only ones who can save it are the deadly Meta Baron, the swashbuckling Kill Wolfhead, and the bumbling John DeFool, who is the ever aptly named DeFool. And so Mark Waid told us a little bit about this originally, where I still, it rings in my head his description about the Psychoverse is a place where everything literally exists in the Psychoverse until it is invented in our universe or the universe, the Matterverse. And once it's invented, it just disappears. And there's a perfect example right at the beginning of Psychoverse of that, about a man inventing a knife and fork.
Yeah.
And it just disappears. Oh, my utensil. Yeah. But made me laugh. So we come into this, but it's a prequel. And we read this in two different ways, because I had already read the original and a lot of the subsequent books. I got the big giant, the thick edition where I could read all the subsequent books, although it did take a while. There's a lot to read. Yeah. And Jesus came into this having not read any of the original. So
that's great. That's cool that you got both of those perspectives. That's awesome.
And I think we were texting each other a little bit last night as we were each reading through this. And I remember, Jesus, I was texting you and I was super excited about it. I was just like, oh my God, I know where it's going, but it's so fun to see these characters really leading into the world I know they're going. And it's incredible how natural it is. It feels like it's scary how natural, like, yeah, of course this is what happened. Like it almost just seems obvious. Like that's how it had to go. But I am curious, Jesus, would you mind giving your perspective from the angle of having not read the original?
Well, I mean, I haven't read the original, but again, I've seen some panels and stuff like that. So I have some, like a very small semblance of what this is or could have been. I knew it was sci-fi, but man, I just, as I was reading it, I was like, man, this is like, I hate to, keep saying the word because then it just loses all meaning, but it's so cool. Like a hand as a ship, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like a creepy hand as a ship, these psycho nuns, and you're just trying to figure out what's going on. What is this? And then there's a lot of moments of high thought and metaphors. And then there's also levity and jokes and stuff like the suicide one. Oh, it's suicide season or something like, what is going on here? So I just really, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. I did think it was like heady and man, this is like some deep stuff. And you kind of like reflect a little. There's a father-son kind of thing going on there too. I have a son as well. So I'm like, oh man, this is kind of interesting. And what Mark Russell was, conveying through it as well, through this story and these characters. But I really enjoyed it. And I really, like, for me, this has only happened to me one other time. And I think I mentioned it before. I was given the Lord of the Rings 1 and 2, part 1 and part 2, the movie, the week before the third one came out by my friend. And I saw them. I didn't know the movie was coming out. And I said, man, that was awesome, man. Why haven't I heard of this? He goes, well, get ready because we're going this weekend to see the final. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's how this feels. Like, man, I knew about it. I didn't know how cool it was. But now I'm at the precipice of getting to enjoy the rest of this story.
That's awesome. That's so great to hear because, it's a big swing, but I think Mark really does pick up on that fun balance of the crazy, heady philosophy side, but also every page has insane torture devices or crazy chase scenes or like jokes of all natures. It is just, and that is something that he definitely picked up from the Incal and a lot of Jodorowsky works. Is it's a new idea every page. There's stuff with like the man who becomes a planet, which is one of my favorite parts of the book.
God, that's so fun.
It's so
a planetary
great.
Governor or a governor planet.
And it's, it is the kind of thing where like it's you can kind of take it out of the book. It's not a seminal piece of the story, but sort of thematically and philosophically it plays in beautifully, and it's just a fun joke that gets weaved through the story a couple of times. Like it comes back in some very funny ways.
It comes in threes. Comedy comes in threes.
So he's really amazing at building that kind of stuff. And the shorthand I've used to kind of sell this book to people is that it's the Incal's Rogue One. Like it builds a lot of the ideas that are sort of dropped in little ways in the original and just blows them up in this really fun way. And it sort of segues at the end right into the original, in this really elegant and beautiful way. And I'm glad the father-son stuff hit for you too, Jesus, because I have a 3.5-year-old son myself, and there are certain moments with Meta Baron and Saloon in this book that really hit me emotionally every time I read it, which is great. Like, as an editor, we read a book 50 times, front to back. And there's stuff in this book that hit every single time, which doesn't always happen. So, I think they really made something special.
That reminds me, you were saying you've read it 50 times. I actually saw that there was an error. There was a missed comma in there. No, I'm just joking.
Almost certainly there is.
No,
Mark Wade is the first to tell you that never leave your grammar in the hands of editors. We had dedicated proofreaders at Marvel, and I miss them every day.
I'm sorry, it's a bad joke, but I like making those jokes with editors. So
Yeah.
not everybody takes it that well.
You mentioned something that I guess is a good segue that I want to talk about, which is the artwork, right? And I mean, I have it on here, so you can say I haven't written everything down. There's three, there's obviously more, but there's three big pages that kind of stood out to me that are going to be etched in my mind. One of them is the exploding planet of gold, right? Or the golden planet, which was awesome. Okay. One of them is the Psycho Nuns, where they're kind of introduced, and it's all three of them, and you're looking like kind of up and behind, and also because of the colors, which I want to get to again, because you mentioned something really cool about that. And then the death contraption, which I was talking to Jake about. You mentioned it. The death contraption to me was like, this is like so ridiculous, but also so cool and funny and interesting at the same time. When you see that, like, one on the page and two when it's finally done, I guess what goes through your mind with something like that?
Is Mark Russell in therapy? I think is one of the first things. It's a great page, and the kind of thing that is amazing. This is just the magic of comics, is and artists is Dave. Mark just kind of describes that briefly in the script, and I read it and I go, that sounds cool, but what does that even look like? And then I'm like, well, Yannick will figure it out. And then you give it to Yannick, and he does. It shows up, and you're like, oh, that is what that is.
It's an assembly line of death, basically. Yeah, it's just
they're magicians, and I think there's something with Mark and Yannick where they vibed instantly. I could see when I came in and started things up, I could go back and read all of the early emails and stuff to sort of get my feet under me of like, okay, how is this relationship working? How are these books coming together? And man, you can tell it's just like, oh, they get each other. So they can do these things of like, oh, Yannick, here you go. It's a torture device, and they're lining them up, and it's an efficient. There's all these lines about efficiency from the Psycho Nuns. And nothing. Since this is a world of pure possibility and creativity, you can't just have a guillotine. You can't just have an electric chair or whatever.
But for it to be so horrifyingly like perfect.
Efficient.
Yeah, horrifyingly efficient.
That's what's horrifying about it is, you look at it and you go, yeah, okay.
I get it. As long as the nuns spinning don't get tired, I guess the efficiency is forever.
Yeah.
So something about the artwork while we're talking about it, the original artwork by Mœbius is commonly referenced when it comes to inspiration for sci-fi films. It was heavily referenced in Blade Runner. It was heavy. I mean, obviously, The Fifth Element is like a direct drop from it. But the thing that this does is, I believe it really gives new references. Again, like Jesus was talking about with some of these visuals, the Psycho Nuns, the death machine, all of these things are literally things I've never seen before in my entire life. They are things that I had never imagined before. And there are the ship that's shaped like a hand, all of it. Immediately, I'm like, this is something completely new that I feel is going to immediately be somebody is going to take this and they're going to make their own version of it for a sci-fi film. And everybody's going to say, hey, look, I know where that came from.
Yeah. It's a testament to the creation of these books that I think, I don't want to put words in Mark Russell's mouth or anything, but I think you can really feel the excitement when he got this assignment, and you can feel that electric joy of creation when, when someone reaches out to you and says, hey, we're going to let you do a new Incal story for the first time outside of Jodorowsky. And I'm sure Mark's first thought was, all right, what are the rules?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what are the rules? It's like, well, the rules are be creative, make something new and exciting. It's like, okay, sure, but like, what are the rules? What do I no, just go. And every page, I think, is imbued with that. And I think it's probably part of why he did the story he did, because it is a story about creation. It's a story about building something new, defining something different, making something extraordinary and strange. All of the like behind the scenes creation, creativity, and freedom made it onto the page in this book, I think, in a really extraordinary way. So all of those images that you see, again, I just think are Mark and Yannick being like, we've been entrusted with the greatest thing you can give a creator, freedom. Let's go. Let's play.
Yeah. Let's play in the sandbox. And one thing too that you made mention, which I definitely wanted to get back to, is you made mention to the European market and the colors. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's their taste or what, but it's awesome, right? Like the colors in this book just like bring the whole thing to life. And I wonder, why is it different, I guess, to have these type of colors? Because I felt like they set moods, right? The colors and the way they were chosen when certain characters are on the page, they set a mood of what you're looking for. And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out why there's a difference between the European market and I guess the US market. Is that something you can speak to more of?
Yeah, I'll tell you very candidly, when I got the job, one of the things, because Mark Waid was part of hiring me. And one of the things Mark discussed with me was, he's like, hey man, colors, you're going to have to figure out a new way of looking at colors, because particularly with the superhero market that I came from, we are all about bright, vivid colors. You want those Spider-Man reds to pop. You want that Hulk green to be, neon, shining, eye-catching on a cover. Like it's very basic, very primary colors. The heroes are primary and the villains are secondary, which is awesome. It's this, phantasmagorical almost, really cool color palette. And there's something about the European market where they really want things to look realistic and lived in a particular way. So that was the thing for them, was like, okay, when we have these colors, like one of the things that I'll point, I don't know if you have the book open, but there's the ships that they steal from the Bergs. Like they have the ship that they get at the junkyard and stuff.
Yeah,
and
the junk planet.
The red of that ship is something we did a lot of needling on, because if that was an American comic book red, it would be like pure shining polished chrome,
Yeah.
But here in this European comic, they were like, okay, well, they're getting it out of a junkyard. It's got to feel lived in, and it's a space machine, and it's traveling through harsh territory. So we want this red that feels lived in, and so if you look at the red on that ship, I think that's a real easy touch point to look at the difference between American, particularly superhero comic coloring, and European style coloring. It's very earthy. It's very lived in kind of palettes and approaches to color.
And now, do you feel like with regards to colors, I guess, who are you? And I know Mark Waid was the one who talked to you about colors initially, but where else are you feeling that pressure? Is it really just from the consumers within Europe, where this book is going to be, ripped apart because, well, you know what I mean? Like they're going to.
Yeah. No, well, we're a French-owned company. The headquarters are in Paris, and then we have the offices here in sunny Los Angeles. But the owner of the company, Fabrice Giger, is here in the LA offices. So we have Fabrice, our artistic director, Jerry Frisson, who also is a writer and has written some other Jodorowsky universe books. He's here as well. So they are my North Stars as far as the colors go. So I send those things to Fabrice. I send those things to Jerry. We might bring in a couple other people from the Paris office just to say, okay, is this working? Is this vibing? But generally, once you've got a palette down, the colorist gets the game, right? So, you establish that in the first few pages, and then once you've got it, you can kind of up and run. But they have helped me again with my knowledge of the European market and the differences there. It was very interesting. It's been a real interesting learning experience looking at the differences and the similarities between the two.
And is this a simultaneous release in Europe and in the US, or I guess worldwide?
Almost simultaneous. It'll be released a little earlier here. I think it comes out top of next year in Paris, in Europe.
Oh,
But
the original one was that originally released in Paris first, or in Europe?
Yeah, well, the original was done in sections in Metal Hurlant, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I thought so. And that was released, I guess, monthly, but it wasn't collected by Humanoids, I guess, till significantly later.
88 or so, I think. I want to say like 88 or 89. It was finished and collected and put out as a unit.
Yes. Which is so interesting because we've talked now a few times about a lot of foreign books, right? Our first published, we were talking about Chainsaw Man, again, published, in sequences in a magazine or a larger publication. Akira was published the exact same way. It is just a different world. But in this particular instance, this is not being chopped up or anything like that for the foreign markets?
No. And the thing about French comics, which again, we sort of orient ourselves a little towards the French, is that they tend to do things called tomes, which are like 50 to 55 pages. So they do sort of larger, quote unquote, single issues that tend to be done in one stories, and then they'll do series of those tomes. So most of our books that we publish here are sort of 2 tomes in France. So they'll do tome 1 and tome 2, and together they will be a 100 to 120 page graphic novel that we'll do here when we do those reprints. So, when we're putting things together, we have to kind of think, okay, what would the tome version be as well? And we had considered, before my time when they were talking about putting this out, we had considered doing these in singles. So it is broken up into 5 chapters that are about 20 to 24 pages. But then we just decided it worked better as a whole,
I'm so glad you did. I don't know why I've just recently really started preferring this. I've always been a single issue reader, but suddenly it's just been this wave.
It's impatience. It's impatience. You just don't have the patience.
That's fine. I'll accept that.
Also, coming from Marvel, I love the Marvel style, but I also just love having a story that is complete and in itself, And there's always that kind of weird dance on a monthly where you're like, okay, are we going to go for this many issues or this many issues, or how are they doing? Do we need to change something in the later issue depending on how the first issue is received, and yada, yada, yada. Whereas, here we just build the story. The fact that you're just like, here's the story we're going to tell. We've got this beginning, middle, and end plan, and we just make it, is a cool change of pace. I kind of like looking at these things as a whole.
Nice. Well, what are you working on next at Humanoids? Or I'm assuming you have so many plates that you're trying to keep spinning, I suppose. But what's coming down the pipe?
We have a lot of fun stuff. We have 2 more of these Incal books. They're coming up next is Dying Star, which is written by Dan Waters and drawn by John Davis Hunt. And that one will be coming out early-ish next year, I think. We're sort of putting the finishing touches on that right now. That one follows Commander Kanan from Final Incal. and is a really beautiful story. I love it. And after that, the final one will be Kill Wolfhead, which is Brandon Thomas writing and Pete Woods drawing. That one is gorgeous and very funny. It is sort of the Deadpool comic of these three. It's very meta-textual and pulls a lot of narrative hijinks and stuff. It's a really fun, trippy book, sort of into the headspace of Kill Wolfhead. It's rad.
Which is by far my favorite character.
Yeah?
Even from the original, I was huge fan of that character.
I think my favorite character are the Berg, just because they have to fill out paperwork for everything that they do. It's just so hilarious to me.
What's funny is there's kind of a similar beat in Dying Star. There's something in the air about bureaucracy in this world that I think is very funny. I think you'll really dig Kill Wolfhead. It's a really interesting take on the character. Brandon does some really cool exploration of who he is and how he's perceived in the world. It's really neat.
Well, I one of my favorite things about Wolfhead is simply the surface level. When I originally read the Incal, the surface level look at this character, like you assume a lot of things, and he's so deep. Very much so. Like he has a lot of very deep emotional thoughts, and you wouldn't think that about somebody who really, the first time you meet him, aggression. More than aggression. The first time you meet the character in the original, the character is having sex with somebody, where we kind of sort of lead to in this book in Psychoverse. But there's a lot of aggression. There's a lot of anger in this character. So you get that surface level. You're like, oh, he's your typical werewolf man. That's all brawn and no brains. And he really does have a lot of deep emotions. And I do love that we get to see that a lot more in Psychoverse too. So that's great. Very excited about those books.
Yeah. So those are, and again, they're very different, which is also really cool. Just none of them play like the others do, but they add up to this, again, whole new sort of vision of Incal, which is pretty rad. And then outside of that, we've got some other just really cool books. Again, the nice thing about Humanoids, one of the things I really love is they do a lot of different kinds of books. So like we just had a book come out about Beethoven. That's sort of this like one strange moment in Beethoven's life that sort of changed everything, where he stood up to French aristocracy, which is kind of cool. It's a beautiful, stunning book in black and white. Really, really neat.
Oh, nice.
And we've got some reissues of some classic Jodorowsky stuff. So if you really dig this book, I know we just did a new Techno Priests. I think the new Megalex versions are coming out soon. So I really am a big Jodorowsky stan. I think he, again, is just sort of pure imagination and just fearless explorations of narrative and the possibilities of the medium. So if you like this, I highly encourage you to go out and find some more Jodorowsky to read, which we've got some more on shelves now and coming soon. There's also, like, we're doing a really cool book. If you guys are film fans, there's a director, Wim Wenders, that we're doing a book where a guy who did storyboards for him sort of has this cool behind the scenes book where he's talking about building out the storyboards for this one sequence, and Wim Wenders' philosophy on filmmaking and stuff. So really, again, just some really cool, very different kind of books, doing some really cool, different stuff. And then for next year, there's just some things we're working on putting out right now that I think are really, really cool. People are going to get really excited about. It's crazy working in the book. I love having like the one story approach, but it's kind of funny because when you do the single issues, you get them done and then they're on sale in like a few weeks. But for the book market, I'm like, oh yeah, these things we're putting out right now are going to be up in like 3 months or so.
It takes a while.
Yeah, you got to reorient yourself to the timeline, which these days is hard enough. So.
Absolutely. But that is exciting. I'm certainly very excited about what's coming down the pipe from Humanoids. That's one of the things I always thumb to in the previews and things like that. So certainly excited about that. Thank you so much for sharing. For all you listeners out there wanting to know when you can get your hands on the Psychoverse, it's going to happen today. Or if you're listening to this the day that we're releasing this episode, Tuesday, November 15th. Is the release date for the Psychoverse. It's going to be available online and at your local retailers. So definitely go and look for it. We are highly recommending it, or at least I am. Jesus, I won't speak for you.
No, I mean, I definitely recommend it as well. And I, as a collector, do have a quick question before we move on. There, in the preview that we got, there's two. It seems like there's two covers. Is that correct?
No, I think there's just one. Yeah.
Which one am I looking at? That's one like where it's the Fool falling, and then there's another one where it's the ship and then the Psycho Nuns, and it's the same one.
Oh, I think those are sort of designed front plates. The actual cover is this very trippy. You see the triangle of the Incal, and there's the Fool and the sort of Psychoverse sort of fluid stuff all around it. The Fool and Depot were there on the cover. Yes. That's the cover. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure because both of them would look cool as covers, and I would want to collect both of them. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. If you haven't, like myself, been introduced into the Incal universe, I would definitely recommend it because it will get you into it, and it's even on its own. At the end, I was wanting to know more, so it did its job to get me into the universe itself. But as its own, I think it's a really cool thing on its own by itself. Like Rogue One, Rogue One, like you mentioned, is a good selling point. So I definitely recommend it as well.
Very, very cool. That is 2 thumbs up from us. And we actually have a special surprise for all you listeners out there. Everybody who is accustomed to Spec Tales listening to this show, you know that we have our signature segment, and we wouldn't be able to get away without doing this.
Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale.
So Jake here, not me, Jake Thomas, being the astute man he is, prepared for our show like an awesome individual would. And he came with a grail tale of his own. So Jake, would you mind sharing with us and the listeners, what's your comic book grail?
Absolutely. I have a very unusual one because I am not a collector. I don't have the collector mentality, or at least if I do, I've tried to stamp it down because I spent most of my life in New York in a small apartment, my adult life, I guess. We just don't have the room for huge collections of things. But as previously mentioned, I worked for 11 years at Marvel and loved my time there. Marvel is full of just amazing people that I'm still friends with and very close with, just a real tight-knit bunch of brilliant, genius lunatics. But one of my favorite people I ever worked with there was Flo Steinberg, which if you're a Marvel fan, if you're a real Marvel zombie, you probably know fabulous Flo Steinberg. She was Stan Lee's Gal Friday back in the day, wore a million hats at that place. And when I started, she was running the proofreading, the aforementioned proofreading department. My beloved proofreaders. And one of the things about Flo was she was cranky and very New York, but also just lovely and really interested in people and wanted to talk to you and get to know you. And so she knew that I was a big horror movie nut and a big fan of Forrest Ackerman, which if you don't know, Forrest Ackerman was like one of the original fanboys. He had this incredible collection of movie and pop culture memorabilia, particularly horror-based. He had the sort of museum at his house called the Acker Mansion, where you could come and see all of these amazing props and stuff. And he did a magazine called I swear I'm gonna like get this wrong and butcher myself because I always get one of the words wrong, but it's the Famous Monsters of Hollywood.
Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Filmland, that's it. Jesus. Yeah, I always screw that up when I'm on the spot. But so I loved, and I don't even know how I got to know about him. Just one of those guys where when you're a weird horror nerd like I was back in the 90s, you found out about Forrest Ackerman somehow. And so we were talking one day, and apparently Flo, Forrest would come into the Marvel offices because he was just a huge nerd. So if he was in New York, he would come and stop by because he knew Stan Lee, he knew everybody. And he would come in and flirt with Flo, who was and remained a dish. So she one day, when she found out that you liked something or were interested in something, if she had anything in her crazy house of collectibles that she thought you might like, she'd come in and give it to you because that was just how she was. She was, when I knew her, she was pretty old. She died a few years ago, and but she had all this stuff, and she loved passing things along, and so she brought in the program to the Lunacon convention from 1974, where Forrest Ackerman was the guest of honor, and in the corner of the cover, there is a note written to Flo from Forrest that says, "For Flo, Flo the Wonder Girl, from her admirer, Forey." And she gave this to me, and she gave me, over the years, she gave me a bunch of really crazy. She gave me a pen, a branded pen from the Acker Mansion. She gave me a set of Mœbius vampire teeth that they did as a promo for like the original Mœbius book back in the day. She would just, I have all of these fun little tidbits from Flo, but this, meeting of two titans, Forrest Ackerman and Flo Steinberg, this fun bit of flirty history is a real prized piece for me, something that I really cherish because it helps me remember Flo, one of my favorite people.
That is incredible. It's one of one, right? It can never be replicated.
I mean, look, Forrest Ackerman was a pretty hardcore flirt, so maybe he might have been a dozen just to cover the spread. But
he just has a stack. He just has a stack, and then he just changes the name on it, and he's just handing him out his calling card. No, but I think that's pretty awesome. We talked a little bit about this off before we started, but it captures a moment in time in history and flirty history, like you talked about. With two, pretty important people in comics and also in pop culture, for the most part. Like you also mentioned that he was the Guillermo del Toro before Guillermo del Toro. He just didn't make stuff. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Guillermo del Toro, I cannot speak to this with any authority, but I think he has a lot of Ackerman's old collection. I'm sure they probably met because Ackerman died in like 2008 or something, I think. Like he... So I'm sure you can probably find pictures of Del Toro and Ackerman hanging out. I'm pretty sure that's true as well, just because of what type of collector Guillermo del Toro is. But back to yours. Now I have a quick question on this too, because you're just showing it, flaunting it around. Are you going to preserve it, protect it? Like, is that something that you're thinking about doing?
Again, I don't have that collector mentality, and there's so like if you see it, there's little like. A couple little stains and stuff. Those are Flo stains. sort of like how we talked about with Jodorowsky having that very free-flowing philosophical view of like it's life, let it grow, let it flourish. Something feels a little weird about putting this behind glass. Maybe one day I will. I don't, once I actually live in a house with an office or something, maybe I'll put it up and mount it. But for the time being, it feels like it should kind of be touched,
So,
kind of be out a little bit.
Do you keep that in your office, your work office? Do you keep that as kind of a talking point, something to have around?
It's on my comic book shelf. I have it kind of put up there. With a lot of my comic books and stuff. So it lives in the world that birthed it, my comic book career. It's got a nice little place of prominence there. I don't have I live in an apartment that's bigger than my old New York apartment, but I still don't have the elusive office out here in LA yet. So one day,
someday you'll get there.
Yeah, it's up high enough that my 3-year-old can't get it.
That is the type of preservation you need. That makes a lot of sense. So I knew about Famous Monsters of Filmland. One of our guests that we had on, Chris, a friend of ours. One of his grails was the first issue of that series. And he said, it wasn't exactly like the most valuable book or anything collectible that he had owned, but to him, it was the absolute most important because it had really, influenced a lot of his life and and it was a memory of his when he first, if I recall, he had said that magazine was the first magazine he had ever seen boobs. And so I'm pretty
a big moment in every young man's life.
I'm pretty sure that was Chris. That was one of his reasons. So I knew the magazine, but I got to say, I didn't know who Forrest Ackerman was until you really brought him up. But he is fascinating, right? Go rabbit hole down his Wikipedia page, and you'll never come back, guys.
Yes, that is. I'm primary item number 1 is go out, pick up Psychoverse.
Number 1.
Item number 2, check out Forrest J. Ackerman. He is a fascinating dude.
Don't lose focus, everybody. Make sure you get your priorities straight on that.
And don't do them out of order either. Don't do them out of order.
Oh, you'll never make it to Psychoverse if you find Ackerman. You'll get lost. All right. Well, Jake, thank you so much for bringing the Grail Tale, because that was, for me, sort of unexpected. I guess I thought we were coming into this really just to talk about the Psychoverse, which I would have been thrilled to just do. And then you blew our minds by saying, well, I brought this along. I was like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Any opportunity to talk about Flo and Forrest Ackerman, I will take in a heartbeat. So I'm happy to do it.
Awesome.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's an amazing Grail Tale too, man.
It really is. It's definitely one of the best. You know what? We're going to vote this best of the week for sure.
Oh, thank you.
So, Jake, thank you very much. That's really going to come to the end of our questions and things like that. But let's leave everybody, of course, with, as you said, make sure you go find Psychoverse. Go look it up. It's going to be available. This thing is also available digitally, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
wherever fine digital products are sold.
Exactly. So definitely go find that. Jake, would you like to point anybody to where to find you online or anything like that?
Oh, I just disappeared from Twitter. So
I wonder why.
You know,
is there any reason why you chose like right now to do it?
It's a weird, just real happenstance, I think. I'm on Instagram. I mostly use Instagram to look at people's art. So I'm not on there a ton, but there you can find me on Insta. I don't even know what my handle is, to be honest. Let me see if I can. Jake Awake 2017 is my.
There you go, everybody. That's the third thing you should do. Remember, first is Psychoverse, second is Forrest Ackerman, and third is finding Jake Awake 2017 on Instagram. If you do those 3 things, you'll get a special prize. But it'll take you a while. Anyway, thanks again, Jake, and thanks for everybody out there listening. Have a good week.